To Sri Sri Radha Madhav as well. So today's speaker is Vraja Dulali Mataji. I think it's a second class, if I'm not wrong. Mataji came into Krishna consciousness through her sister. Her sister was first introduced to Krishna consciousness in her university, and she used to get a lot of books home. And Vraja Dulali Mataji found one book called Nectar of Instruction near their home altar, and she found it extremely interesting, and then continued to read some more books like Science of Self-Realization, the Krishna book, and some other books, and really got inspired to start chanting. And then she gradually built up her rounds. Mataji is originally from Labra, but she's moved to Wimbledon in London a few years back, I guess. So when Mataji was in Labra, she started associating with other devotees and also began her services in Namahattas, Kirtan events, festivals, and other events. Whenever there was an opportunity to serve, she would enthusiastically serve. She also did backup services for Sri Sri Radha Madhav and occasional Maha cleanups. She completed her Bhakti Sastri conducted by His Holiness Bhakti Prabha Maharaj in 2015. Thereafter, she got initiated from His Holiness Indradyumna Maharaj in June 2017. She is living in Wimbledon, like I said before, with her husband, Michael. They both are doing wonderful services there to inspire many, many devotees. They hold weekly sanghas and discuss Bhagavad-Gita, celebrate festivals, and as a team, also they do services at the London Temple. She conducts weekly Srimad Bhagavatam reading sessions for ISKCON Leicester devotees virtually on Zoom. I think it's in the morning. The details are shared by Janki Mataji in the Serving Krishna Together group daily. She does Kirtan sessions as well for ISKCON London devotees, I'm told, which is wonderful, really. She serves Sadhvi Sangha, which is a Sangha for Matajis. She collects quotes which are posted on Facebook and Instagram. And professionally, she's a PE teacher. Mataji, thank you for agreeing to take the class. I really, really appreciate it. Over to you now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Good morning. Hope you're well. Thank you so much. We'll start with Radha Madhav. Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jayo Giribharadhari, Jayo Giribharadhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jayo Giribharadhari, Jayo Giribharadhari, Yashodanandana Vrajjanaranjana, Yashodanandana Vrajjanaranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jayo Giribharadhari, Jayo Giribharadhari, Yashodanandana Vrajjanaranjana, Yashodanandana Vrajjanaranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivaja Acharya Astotara Sata Shri Srimad Abhijanaravindra Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivaja Acharya Astotara Sata Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prema Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Yamuna Maya Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Sama Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Gaura Brahmanandi, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. So Canto 1, Chapter 8, verse text 40. Imi janan pada shravda supa kavoshadi viruta vanadri nadi udhanvanto hi adante tava vikshite. Imi, all these janapada, cities and towns, shravda, flourished, supakva, mature, asuddhi, herbs, viruta, vegetables, vana, forests, adri, hills, nadi, rivers, udhavanta, seas, he, certainly, idante, increasing, tava, by you, vikshite, seen. Translation by His Divine Grace, Abhijanaravindra Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All these cities and villages are flourishing in all respects because the herbs and grains are in abundance, the trees are full of fruits, the rivers are flowing, the hills are full of minerals, and the oceans full of wealth, and this is all due to your glancing over them. Purport. Human prosperity flourishes by natural gifts and not by gigantic industrial enterprises. The gigantic industrial enterprises are products of a godless civilization, and they caused destruction of the noble aims of human life. The more we go on increasing such troublesome industries to squeeze out the vital energy of the human being, the more there will be unrest and dissatisfaction of the people in general, although a few only can live lavishingly by exploitation. The natural gifts, such as grains and vegetables, fruits, rivers, the hills of jewels and minerals, and the seas full of pearls are supplied by the order of the Supreme. And as He desires, material nature produces them in abundance or restricts them at times. The natural law is that the human being may take advantage of these godly gifts by nature and satisfactorily flourish on them without being captivated by the exploitative motive of lording it over material nature. The more we attempt to exploit material nature according to our whims of enjoyment, the more we shall become entrapped by the reaction of such exploitative attempts. If we have sufficient grains, fruits, vegetables, and herbs, then what is the necessity of running a slaughterhouse and killing poor animals? A man need not kill an animal if he has sufficient grains and vegetables to eat. The flow of river waters fertilizes the fields, and there is more than what we need. Minerals are produced in the hills and the jewels in the ocean. If the human civilization has sufficient grains, minerals, jewels, water, milk, etc., then why should it hanker after terrible industrial enterprises at the cost of the labor of some unfortunate men? But all these natural gifts are dependent on the mercy of the Lord. What we need, therefore, is to be obedient to the laws of the Lord and achieve the perfection of human life by devotional service. The indications by Kunti Devi are just to the point. She desires that God's mercy be bestowed upon them so that natural prosperity be maintained by his grace. Text 41. Atta Vishva Atman Vishva Murte Svake Shume Sneha Pasam Imam Chindi Didam Pandusha Vrishnishu. Word by word. Atha, therefore, Vishva Isha, O Lord of the universe, Vishva Atman, O soul of the universe, Vishva Murte, O personality of the universal form, Svakeshu, unto my own kinsman, Me, mine, Sneha Pasam, tie of affection, Imam, this, Jindi, cut off, Dridam, deep, Pandushu, for the Pandavas, Vrishnishu, for the Vrishnis also. Translation. O Lord of the universe, soul of the universe, O personality of the form of the universe, please therefore sever my tie of affection for my kinsmen, the Pandavas and the Vrishnis. Purport. A pure devotee of the Lord is ashamed to ask anything in self-interest from the Lord, but the householders are sometimes obliged to ask favors from the Lord, being bound by the tie of family affection. Srimati Kunti Devi was conscious of this fact, and therefore she prayed to the Lord to cut off the affectionate tie from her own kinsmen, the Pandavas and the Vrishnis. The Pandavas are her own sons, and the Vrishnis are the members of a paternal family. Krishna was equally related to both the families. Both the families required the Lord's help because both were dependent devotees of the Lord. Srimati Kunti Devi wished Sri Krishna to remain with her sons, the Pandavas, but by his doing so, her paternal house would be bereft of the benefit. All these partialities troubled the mind of Kunti, and therefore she desired to cut off the affectionate tie. A pure devotee cuts off the limited ties of affection for his family and widens his activities of devotional service for all forgotten souls. The typical example is the band of 6 Goswamis who followed the path of Lord Chaitanya. All of them belong to the most enlightened and cultured, rich families of the higher castes, but for the benefit of the mass of population, they left the comfortable homes and became mendicants. To cut off all family affection means to broaden the field of activities. Without doing this, no one can be qualified as a Brahmin, a king, a public leader, or a devotee of the Lord. The personality of Godhead as an ideal king showed this by example. Sri Ramachandra cut off the tie of affection for his beloved wife to manifest the qualities of an ideal king. Such personality as a Brahmana, a devotee, a king, or a public leader must be very broad-minded in discharging their respective duties. Srimati Kunti Devi was conscious of this fact, and being weak, she prayed to be free from such bondage of family affection. The Lord is addressed as the Lord of the universe, or the Lord of the universal mind, indicating his all-powerful ability to cut the hard knot of family affection. Therefore, it is sometimes experienced that the Lord, out of his special affinity towards a weak devotee, breaks the family affection by force of circumstances arranged by his all-powerful energy. By doing so, he causes the devotee to become completely dependent on him and thus clears the path for his going back to Godhead. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshurame Tamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Staptam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Datati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutpadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvitam Savdutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Patan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Shah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopikanta Radhakanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishapano Sutadevi Pramami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarepescha Kripasimupyevacha Patitanam Panipyo Vishnupyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Veda Gadadhar Shivasti Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Nidhi Swami Tinamine Namo Prabhupada Priya Dasaya Jagannath Yatmanamotaya Bhattasukaya Krishna Kitanena Simhena Raksita Namo Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nidhi Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharire Nivashesha Shunyadi Pashatade Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Veda Gadadhar Shivasti Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Narayan Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaimati Rayat. Translation. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances onto the personality of Godhead Narayan, onto Narayan, the supremest human being, onto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and onto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Shanvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtanam Vidyantos Tohi Abidrani Vidnoti Shortsatam. Shri Krishna, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, is the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment. From the heart of the devotee has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous and properly heard and chanted. Nashte Presha Padreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloke Bhakti Bhati Neshtaki. By regular attendance in class in the Bhagavatam, by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and love and service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So Hare Krishna, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much to Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu for allowing me to, even though I'm so unqualified, to try and speak on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Requesting your blessings and prayers to be able to do this class, to please Guru, Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada, and ultimately the devotees. So I think what would be really nice is just to do a short summary of last week and then to focus on the verses today. So Sucheta Mataji, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, did the class last week, and it was really wonderful, and I really liked the pointers that she made about how to raise children. But Kunti Devi is feeling, you can say, anxious, maybe apprehensive, that Lord Krishna is going to be leaving, because as a result of his imprints, his footprints, Hastinapur has been flourishing because of his presence. And Kunti Devi is afraid that now that Lord Krishna, who's always been on the side of the Pandavas, is going to be leaving, and perhaps some ill luck might happen because he is on his way back home. Actually, Shri Krishna was very merciful. After the war of Kurukshetra, he actually stayed with the Pandavas for a long time before he decided to go home. So he'd actually been away from his home for a long period of time. So let's look at this a bit more closely. The translation is saying that the grains are abundant, the trees are full of fruits, the rivers are flowing, the hills are full of minerals, and the oceans are full of wealth. But if you notice, Kunti Devi never mentions about the use of industry or the slaughterhouses. It's not these things which are making society flourish. Slaughterhouses is something which was created by men, which leads to further problems and further implications. And we can understand from this that all we need to do is depend on God's creations. And there is no scarcity when we depend on the Supreme Lord, will just get ananda, bliss. God's creation is providing sufficient grains, fruits, vegetables, even for the cows who like to eat the grass. Even if we eat things like fruits, some of the skins we can give to the animals, like the bull, the waste of the food we may eat, they will be satisfied from having that. And if we work together by putting Krishna in the center, when there's cooperation between the trees, the animals, the human beings, and all living entities, that's when Vedic civilization starts to happen. That's when the civilization of Krishna consciousness begins to start. Actually, the bull is considered our father because he helps with the production of the grains. And the cows, we look at her as our mother because she is providing us milk. Srila Prabhupada often spoke about simple living, high thinking, or in some books it's quoted plain living, high thinking, because he was really fond of developing farming communities. One such community which was developed was in West Virginia, New Brindavan, and Srila Prabhupada spent a lot of time helping to cultivate the devotees there, how to live that simple life, and help to make that community flourish. He's talking about Krishna's glance and how prosperity is happening due to the Supreme Lord's glance. Now, if we take the example of when we've gone to the temple, or if we think about our own temple, when we sit down in front of their lordships, you are looking at their lordships and their lordships are glancing back at you. In the altar that I have at home, I've got Lord Gopal and I've got Shishida Nitai Vijay Gauranga. And in preparation for this class, when I was listening to Srila Prabhupada's lectures, he was saying when the devotee is sincere, then the Lord's opulence will be revealed more to that devotee. And then the devotee becomes satisfied by seeing this beautiful vision of the lordships. Now, if we think about this material creation, this has happened purely due to Krishna's glance. And the Vedas describe that Lord Krishna glanced over matter, and then matter became agitated. And the same thing happens in this material world. For example, when a woman gets agitated, she becomes pregnant, and she also gives birth to the children. And not only within the human society, but that is also happening in the animal kingdom as well. The whole creation is following a similar process. So just by the Supreme Lord's glance, you can see how the plants, the trees, animals, living entities are coming forth. And we have to remember that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and what is possible for the Lord is impossible for us. Any of his limbs can do any function, whereas we are limited with the senses we have been given. We can only see with our eyes, we can only smell through our nose, we can only take prasadam through our mouth. There's a really nice verse which describes the Lord and about his limbs really, really nicely. It's something that you're familiar with, but how often do we meditate upon what this actually means? Angani ashya sakalen triyavriti manti pashyanti panti kayanti chiram jaganti ananda chimayami satur vala vikrahasya govindam adipurasham tamaham bhajami. So the translation says, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged function of all the organs, and internally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. Lord Krishna is so amazing that if he wants, he can see from his feet. If he wants, he can accept prashadam from his ears. So there is no limit to the Supreme Lord. In fact, this prayer is from Sri Brahma Samhita, but we understand from the scriptures that Lord Brahma actually came from the navel of the Supreme Lord, and he didn't need a woman in order for that to happen. He was able to do that solely by himself. So his body is capable of anything, whereas we are limited in this body. Bhagavad-Gita chapter 9 verse 10 speaks about how there are moving beings and non-moving beings in this world. Moving beings we can think of as insects, animals, human beings, and then also there's the non-living beings in the form of plants and trees. So how does life come into this world? Well, in the human form of life, the child will take its body from its mother. So the mother will grow the child in her womb for 9 months, and the child's body will develop from the blood and the nutrients of the mother's body. And when the body is fit, that's when the child will come out. So it's not the living entity that takes birth, it's the soul that is going to enter that particular body and perform the functions that is meant to happen with that body. Now, Srila Prabhupada would speak with all kinds of people when he used to travel around the world. And sometimes he would come across scientists. And we know Srila Prabhupada was very bold when it came to telling the truth. There was no backing. And one such people that would come across would be scientists. And scientists are always of the understanding impression that where is the proof of eternity? But Krishna says, na hanyati, hanyamane sharine. The soul is not killed when the body is killed. So anything that we share when we do preaching, for example, and chapter 2 covers a lot about the soul, we are in fact saying perfect knowledge. Why? Because this has come from Krishna himself, and Krishna is perfect. So when Krishna says the soul is not killed when the body is killed, then we accept it as fact. Therefore, we are saying the same message to whoever come across. So how do we gain this knowledge? The knowledge comes in 3 different ways. It comes in the form of Shruti, which is through disciplic succession. And you hear this. We understand in the Bhagavad-Gita that Sri Krishna wanted to establish the Bhagavad-Gita again. He says to Arjun, I said this science to Vivashwan, and then to Manu, and then to Manu's son Ikshvakya. And that's how we hear. Knowledge can also come through logic, argument, and also through philosophical research. And the 3rd way we can receive knowledge is through smriti, proof which is established by statements from Shruti. So the Bhagavad-Gita and the Puranas are both examples of smriti. We've already said, I've already shared with you that Lord Krishna is perfect. Us as human beings, we have imperfect senses. And we're also very proud of what we see, that must be truth, or what we hear, that must be truth. But truth is, process of receiving knowledge through direct perception has no value because of our imperfect senses. And let me give you an example. When the sun rises in our minds, we may think, yeah, okay, the sun, it's got to be about 12 inches in diameter. But the truth is the sun is actually 100 times larger than the earth. So then what is the value of our direct perception through the eyes? Not even just the eyes, but through the nose, or even through the ears, or through the other senses that we have. And this is the fault of the scientists. because the scientists try to understand everything by the imperfect senses. The conclusions are always imperfect, and the conclusions are forever changing. Can't say maybe in the future. There's not like a definite answer they can give. Now, Srila Prabhupada had a disciple called Swarup Damodar, whose background was actually in science. He was actually a scientist. And during the time when he was inquiring before he became initiated and a proper devotee, he was asking questions. And Srila Prabhupada was really keen that Swarup Damodar was looked after well, because he saw him as a potential candidate to preach Krishna consciousness, especially amongst the scientist community. In conversation with a fellow scientist, he challenged and he asked, if I was to give you some chemicals, do you think you can produce life? And that scientist replied back by saying that I do not know. So Krishna is perfect. We therefore take knowledge from him. So when he says the soul does not die, when the body dies, that is fact. If we look at all the other natural gifts of nature, then it speaks about the rivers. From the ocean, it comes into a river. And Srila Prabhupada said that the rivers are actually become nasty, they become polluted. Ocean, when untouched by man, can be clear as crystal. And that same water will then move towards the rivers. And this is nature's way. This is Krishna's way. And Srila Prabhupada's questions, what is the use of these huge waterworks to supply water? Even if we take the ocean, if we go deep in, there's oysters. And if you open the oysters, you'll find the pearls. And in the olden days, Srila Prabhupada said that the women used to decorate themselves with pearls, gold, silver, valuable stones. But it's saying nowadays, people just use plastic to decorate themselves. So again, he's asking, what is the use of industry and slaughterhouses? I wanted to, at this point, share some conversations that Srila Prabhupada had with certain people, and just how straight to the point he was. If you haven't read this book, it's called The Hare Krishna Challenge, Exposing a Misdirected Civilization. I'd highly recommend you to read it because it's a really powerful book. And for me, like whenever I've read it, it's been like a thunderbolt kind of feeling in the heart. So I just want to share a snippet of this conversation. So the following conversation happened between Srila Prabhupada and Cardinal John Dulali, which took place in Paris in August of 1973. Srila Prabhupada, but consider the cow. We drink her milk, and therefore she is our mother. Do you agree? Cardinal Dulali. Yes, surely. Srila Prabhupada. So, if the cow is your mother, how can you support killing her? You take the milk from her, and when she's old and cannot give you milk, you cut her throat. Is that a very human proposal? In India, those who are meat eaters are advised to kill some lower animals like goats, pigs, or even buffalo. But cow killing is the greatest sin. In preaching Krishna consciousness, we ask people not to eat any kind of meat, and my disciples strictly followed this principle. But if under certain circumstances others are obliged to eat meat, then they should eat the flesh of some lower animal. Don't kill cows. It is the greatest sin. And as long as a man is sinful, he cannot understand God. The human being's business is to understand God and to love him. But if you remain sinful, you will never be able to understand God, what to speak of loving him. When there is no other food, someone may eat meat in order to keep from starving. That is all right. But it is most sinful to regularly maintain slaughterhouses just to satisfy your tongue. Actually, you will not even have a human society until this cruel practice of maintaining slaughterhouses is stopped. And although animal killing may sometimes be necessary for survival, at least the mother animal, the cow, should not be killed. That is simply human decency. In the Krishna consciousness movement, our practice is that we don't allow the killing of any animals. Krishna says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakti prayachti. Vegetables, fruits, milks, and grains should be offered to me in devotion. Bhagavad-Gita 9.26. We take only prasada, the remnants of Krishna's food. The trees offer as many varieties of fruits, but the trees are not killed. Of course, one living entity is food for another living entity, but that does not mean you can kill your mother for food. Cows are innocent. They give us milk. You take their milk and then you kill them in the slaughterhouse. This is sinful. So here was a powerful exchange of Srila Prabhupada and trying to explain to this cardinal the importance of cows and how we have to protect them. I think also it's talking about what we eat, and ultimately our goal is always to please Krishna, what pleases him, and a segment of that gives us an insight on what's going to make Krishna happy, what's going to please him. So if we look at 9.26, where the full verse speaks about the translation says, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I will accept it. I wanted to share again a segment from the purport so we can have an understanding what it is that Krishna is asking for us. And he gives us instructions on how to follow his instructions. 1, he loves Krishna, will give him whatever he wants, and he avoids offering anything which is undesirable or unasked for. Thus, meat, fish, and eggs should not be offered to Krishna. If he desired such things as offerings, he would have said so. Instead, he clearly requests that a leaf, fruit, flowers, and water be given to him, and he says of this offering, I will accept it. Therefore, we should understand that he will not accept meat, fish, and eggs. Vegetables, grains, fruits, milk, and water are the proper foods for human beings and are prescribed by Lord Krishna himself. Whatever else we eat cannot be offered to him, since he will not accept it. Thus, we cannot be acting on the level of loving devotion if we offer such foods. So Srila Prabhupada also would have a lot of questions asking why not eat meat. And he had one such exchange with a guest who happened to come to the Los Angeles center. And this took place in December of 1968. And the guest started this conversation by saying, if man didn't eat animals, they'd probably just die of starvation or something. Now, I'm not going to read the whole conversation. I'm just going to read a paragraph which formed some of his answers. He says, besides that, scientifically, your teeth are meant for eating vegetables. The tiger has teeth for eating meat. Nature has made it like that. He has to kill another animal. Therefore, he has nails, he has teeth, he has strength. But you have no such strength. You cannot kill a cow like that, pouncing like a tiger. You have to make a slaughterhouse and sit down at your home. If somebody else slaughters the cow, you can eat very nicely. What is this? Do like the tiger, pounce upon a cow and eat. You cannot do that. So here is an example of Srila Prabhupada disapproving of the slaughterhouses, and it's just an immoral place, isn't it? Especially the pain that animals go through. But if we take the example of animals that live in jungles, you have vegetarian and non-vegetarian animals there. And an example of a non-vegetarian is a tiger. Now, Krishna, we are all of his sons and daughters, and he's providing for everyone. No one can say there's scarcity in either the human society or the animal society. But a tiger's life is such that he doesn't get a chance to hunt that often. So when he gets very hungry, that's when he has a chance to kill an animal. But when that tiger actually kills the animal, it keeps its carcass for about a week because he doesn't have access, he or she doesn't have access to food all the time. So how fortunate are we as human beings that the Lord is every day providing for us in the form of fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, and grains. Now, a question can be asked, can your life be successful if you aren't eating meat? Can you survive without meat? Can we have a profession without killing for meat? And the answer is yes. And in our Shastras, we can understand there's a story, an exchange that took place between Narada Muni and a hunter. Narada Muni and all spiritual masters are so compassionate to everyone. And he saw this hunter killing the animals, half killing them. So they would die in excruciating pain because of the way that animal was left to die. And Narada Muni was saying, why are you doing this? And Narada Muni became the spiritual master. And as conversation went on, he said to the hunter to give up his profession. And the hunter was like, well, what am I going to do? This is what my father did. And Narada Muni said, I'll tell you. So he ensured that the hunter broke his bow and arrow and then said, you need to go in a quiet place and chant Hare Krishna. And then he was like, but what about food? How am I going to sustain myself? He's like, don't worry, just chant Hare Krishna, food will come. And then word spread within the vicinity that this hunter was now sitting down chanting Hare Krishna. So these people would come bringing all these natural food to the hunter and his wife. And in fact, they had so much they didn't know what to do with it because it was the two of them. So if we want real peace, real tranquility, then we depend on Krishna. And Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who wrote so many books, sang so many songs, speaks about how the Lord always says surrender to Krishna. Doesn't say anything about surrendering to the slaughterhouses. In fact, so many poor animals are being killed. It's such a sinful activity. How can these people be happy? So Srila Prabhupada in his lectures on these verses also says that it's a sinful life to live a life without Krishna in the center. And when we surrender to Krishna, or even when we surrender to our spiritual master, when we take Diksha, basically all our accounts, they suddenly become squared. And then the sinful life we used to live then results in beginning a new life, a new birth, no more sinful activities again. Of course, in some traditions like the Christian tradition, they have confessions. People come in, say the confessions, and then repeat those same sins week in, week out. Where's the atonement in that? So Lord Krishna encourages us to always be clean, to follow the four regulative principles and always engage in devotional service. And these four regulative principles we follow are actually the four pillars of Dharma. So we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs because we want to be compassionate. We want to show mercy. We don't gamble because we want to speak the truth. We don't do intoxication drugs because of austerity. And we certainly don't do illicit sex because we want to practice cleanliness. So if we move on to the second part, text 41. Now, women in particular are naturally affectionate to two families. They're naturally affectionate towards the family who brought them up to be the woman that they are today. And they will also be affectionate to the husband's side of the family. Kunti Devi is the daughter of Vishnu. She's also the wife and the mother of the Pandavas. And Sri Krishna is equally related on both sides as well. His father is Vasudev and his auntie is Kunti. Despite the Supreme Lord being the Supreme Lord, he still offers his respectful obeisances onto his aunt. But Kunti Devi, Srila Prabhupada describes, is saying a very peculiar prayer. Kunti Devi was a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. She was a unique soul, and her sons and also Draupadi, they were also pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. She lived in a favorable, you can say, family atmosphere. You know, her sons, they were respectful, they were popular, they were loved, they were obedient. Why would you want to leave such a setting? You wouldn't want that, but still she's asking for that. Now, if your family circumstances were unfavorable, there's an example in the Srimad Bhagavatam of a king called King Anga. King Anga had a very cool son called Vena. He didn't believe in worshipping God, carrying out sacrifices. He wasn't fit to be king. But when he saw what was happening, he thought, okay, this is now the time for me to retire and go to the forest. And he actually left in the middle of the night his kingdom, because his Vraja loved him so much that had he not left in the middle of the night, then all the people would have followed him. But here is an example of a situation where King Anga left due to unfavorable circumstances to detach himself from family ties. So what is Kunti Devi showing us in this regard? So she's actually showing that by being immersed, involved in bhakti, we're becoming more attached to Krishna and less attached to the material world. We don't want to be like demigod worshippers, for example, where we worship God to increase one's opulence in the material world, when really we should be doing our best to become free from material attachment. Of course, we can follow Srila Prabhupada's example of using material things for the service of Lord Krishna. Srila Prabhupada would do his recordings of classes and Srimad Bhagavatam using the tape recorder. And our suffering, which is happening in this world, is due to attachment. We learn from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that at the age of 24, he left his beautiful, loyal wife, he left his affectionate mother, who were completely dependent on them because Jagannath Mishra had passed away, to live this life of renunciation, vairagya, to show us how to detach and how to become a devotee of Krishna. He was following the Harinam, Harinam, Harinamaya Kevalam, Galo Nashteva, 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 Gatiranyata. In this age of quantum hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is by chanting the holy name of the Lord. There is no other way, no other way, no other way. Loving Krishna, love of Krishna, is not easy to attain, because by his love, one can purchase Krishna. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributed this love even to Jagai and Madai. As aspiring devotees, we actually pray for Srimati Radharani's mercy, because she is the topmost bhakt of bhakti. She loves Krishna the most. She knows how to serve him the best. And by getting her mercy, she is going to recommend us to Krishna. Oh, look, there's a nice devotee. Krishna, you should definitely accept him or her. So that's why we are very fond of Srimati Radharani. Kunti Devi is illustrating to us that we need to detach ourselves from society, from friendship, from love. Otherwise, this is going to lead to entanglement. And how does this entanglement take place? Well, it takes place in different forms. It takes place in the form of family, in the form of nation, in the form of religion, in the form of love. Maya is telling us, actually causing us to dance. We're the member of this family. We're the member of this nation. And this ties in quite well with 3.27 of the Bhagavad-Gita, where it says, Prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sharvasha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Translation says, the bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. So those materialistic persons who think they are the controller, they aren't. It's Krishna who's the supreme controller. And when we practice our spiritual life, yes, it is Krishna who's controlling it, but we are trying to center our life as much as we can around Krishna, because we know he's the controller. And that's the difference between the thinking of a materialistic man and the thinking of a woman or a man who follows this path of bhakti. Srila Prabhupada really didn't approve of nationalism. So when he was thinking of the name for our ISKCON, there was lots of names being thrown around like God consciousness, but he went for ISKCON, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, because he wanted this to be accessible to everyone around the world. He didn't want it to be limited. If we look back at Srila Prabhupada's first interaction with his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was very much for support of Gandhi's movement to make India free. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, no, this isn't priority. You seem like a nice student. Why don't you preach Krishna consciousness to English-speaking countries? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had a visitor come once and said, what are you doing for what you're doing for the nation? You Hare Krishnas, you just chant. What are you actually doing for the nation? You're doing nothing. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually replied in a very intelligent manner. He said, if you want people for the army, you really need to have strong, muscular men to recruit. You see my men here? They're skinny. Just let them sit down, just let them eat food and chant Hare Krishna. They're no use to you. So that's how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur addressed the theme of nationalism with one of his guests. So Kunti Devi here is demonstrating to us that we need to become free from this bodily concept of life. Currently, we're in this human form of life, but who knows what we were in 5 births or 10 births or 20. That's irrelevant now. We need to focus on now and the present. We are doing our best to utilize this human form of life to understand God, because that's the only form of life you can do that in. The animals can't really know about Krishna. So we need to focus on a devotional service, and we need to focus on preparing our next body. So everything we do is leaving impressions in our heart. In our Srimad Bhagavatam readings, we recently read about a king called King Puranjana. King Puranjana was a king who was too much attached, had too much affection for his wife. During the time of death, he actually thought of his wife, and therefore his next birth was as a woman. But he also performed pious activities. As a result of those pious activities, he became a woman, and he was born in royalty again. If we say she now, she had the great fortune of having a father who happened to be Krishna conscious. So she was in a very, very favorable environment. She got married to a very sincere devotee of Krishna, and her children then became very good devotees of Krishna as well. So here's an example of what happens when we have too much attachment. We can also learn from the example of King Bharat. King Bharat left so he could go in the forest. But unfortunately, when he was in the forest, he got too much attachment towards the deer. And so he became a deer in his next life. But he remembered that. And then he had to finish his life as a deer to then come as Jadavara and then finish what is the aim, the goal of this life. Srila Prabhupada had, when he went to Russia, he had an exchange with Professor Kovatsky, who said, after this body, everything is finished. But we know that's not the case. 2.13 Bhagavad-Gita says, Dehi nosmin yata dehi, komaram yuvanam jara, tata dehantara prapti diras tatina muyati, as the embodied soul continue passes from boyhood to youth to old age. The soul simply passes into another body at the time of death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. So when we have, or when people question things like this, if we do book distributions or if we're doing talks, then we destroy people's arguments by weapons of logic and reasoning with them. Kunti Devi also refers to the Lord as Vishvesha. Vishvesha means the Lord of the universe. Have you noticed, or do you ever think about how the sun rises on time, the seasons change when they need to change, the seasonal fruits and flowers make their appearance at a timely manner? So how can people say that these things are going on without a controller? It's not possible. Kunti Devi also describes Krishna as Vishva Murti. Again, universe, speaking about, constantly referring to the universe. And we can see Arjun in connection to this, because Arjun requested the Lord to see his universal form. And we can read about all the descriptions in chapter 11 of the Bhagavad-Gita, and can see that link. So Kunti Devi is praying, please sever my ties. And how do these ties happen? The ties happen due to illusion, and it all starts back, Srila Prabhupada is saying, between a man and a woman. A man and a woman meet, a man and a woman get married, a man and a woman have a family. Their children get older, they get married, they get grandchildren. So as that cycle goes on and on, that family affection gets that little bit more closer, that little bit more tighter. Actually, the Vedic way of life teaches us about detachment. Shri Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad-Gita how there are 4 ashrams. You've got the Brahmacharya ashram, you've got the Grahastha ashram, you've got the Vanaprastha ashram, and then you've got the Sannyas ashram. Formerly, in particular, during the Vanaprastha ashram, the husband and wife would go away to holy places, places of pilgrimage, and spend time focusing on the Supreme Lord. The wife would be the support for the husband. Then they would come back home, spend about a month or 2 with their children, and then they'd go back again, doing the same thing. But then when the man is ready to take the next step of sannyas, that's when he sends his wife back, and then the wife is looked after by the children. So the Vedic way of life is teaching us about detachment, and Kunti Devi is saying, detach me from family attraction. She's saying, Kunti prays, kindly help detach me from this family attraction. This is Kunti Devi's instructions. So what have we learned today? We've learned to always depend on the Supreme Lord, on his mercy, on his glance, have full satisfaction that the Lord is always going to provide for us. Kunti Devi is an ideal devotee, and for us it would be hard maybe to pray for helping for detachment from family ties, because this is our family for this life. We've had so many families prior to that, but in this life we are with who we are. But Kunti Devi is asking for family ties to be cut, and we can only learn from her example and try and follow in her footsteps, even though the bar is just too high to follow. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you have any comments, questions, realizations, please do interact. So I know there's not a blank screen behind me. And Kantaram Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you so much, Dulali Mataji. That was a wonderful class. I request all the participants to ask any questions, share their realizations or comments.
Hare Krishna, this is what a wonderful class it was. Thank you so much. Actually, lot to take away. A lot of information about slaughterhouses as well. And I just want to make a point over here. It's not about Bhagavatam. You see, India celebrates is rather celebrating its Independence Day today. But there's a dark statistics behind slaughterhouses in India as well. Not cows, but buffaloes. They are the fourth largest exporter of buffalo meat for the past 10 years. So that reminds us that we need freedom from a lot of stuff, not just not just from Britishers. Just want to make a point of that yeah, slaughterhouses are so much there, and there's so much thriving in every country. So yeah, just want to make it that point. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Prabhu.
Haribol, do we have any questions? Anyone, please, suggestions, comments, questions, please fire away.
From the comments, we can make out that everyone seems to be very happy and content. Thank you so much, Mataji.
Yeah. So, Prabhu, I just want to make a comment now. So, devotees, we are on our last leg of Kunti Maharani's prayer. So, thank you for joining us every week. Thank you, Dulali Mataji, for today's class. It was really, really well explained. Next week, our dear Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu will be taking the Bhagavatam class on the last two verses of Kunti Maharani prayers. Please join us again. Apart from that, we also have something exciting coming up on Kunti Maharani prayers, which I will share in the next class. Please tune in next week. Thank you again. Hare Krishna. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Her Grace Dulali Mataji ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for a wonderful class.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for a lovely class.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Vraja, thank you so much. Amazing class. Well done. Hare Bol.